Hello, happy Friday, and welcome to the True Crime Cocktail Hour. This is our weekly little treat after a tough week of work, and this is where we sit down, relax, have a drink if you want, and since you're already here and interested in true crime stories, why don't I tell you one? On today's episode of the True Crime Cocktail Hour, we will be talking about a female serial killer, the poison witch of Worms. No, not the animal, but the small village in the southwest of Germany. So let's not lose any more time. Cheers, and let's deep dive into the story of Christa Lehmann. Christa Lehmann was born on the 24th of February 1923, and her life was characterized by worry and loss right from the beginning. When Christa was 2 years old, her mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and this woman, she wasn't able to take care of her children anymore, and she spent the better part of her life in various institutions. Christa's parents separated officially 3 years later, and Christa's father also remarried, but the marriage with his second wife wouldn't also last long, and so for the most part, Christa grew up without any kind of mother figure. After finishing school, Christa worked various jobs without ever getting anywhere, and in 1940, when Christa was 17 years old, she committed her first crime. She stole a pair of women's shoes from one of her colleagues, was caught, and sentenced to 2 weeks in prison. Now, according to Christa, the reason why she would steal the shoes in the first place was that she couldn't afford any of her own, which is fair because it was 1940. And my people screwed up big time, and money and resources were scarce. In 1943, Christa was drafted into the military service and from then on worked at a pharmaceutical company, a job that she was fully involved in. She loved it. And also during this year, she met her future husband, Carl Joseph Lehmann. He was not called in for military service for health reasons. He had a chronic stomach ulcus, is that how you say it? And he was walking with a limp. So Carl Joseph was not exactly the George Clooney Christa had hoped for, and it was the Second World War. If there ever were suitable bachelors around Christa, they would soon be drafted into the military service and sent off to the battlefields. And this sounds super mean, but Christa, she was already 21 years old, she had to get married and raise a family. Christa just had to pick what was left, It sounds totally mean, but that's just how it was. What are you gonna do? So Christa, she got married to this Carl Joseph Lehmann guy, and together with him and his parents, she moved into this big house. They got children. Honestly, that was just a dream coming true for Christa. For once, she had her own perfect little family. But we're here, right? So yeah, happiness doesn't really last long. As soon as they got married, Carl Joseph, he started to show his true colors. This man, he lied. He cheated, and he was violent. When Christa and him started dating, he earned his living as a tiler, but his business went pretty much downhill because of the Second World War, and he also developed a serious alcohol problem. Christa several times tried to leave him, but divorce was something that was frowned upon back then in the days. And I don't know why, but Carl Joseph always managed to convince her to give this marriage a second chance. But of course, things didn't get any better, and soon Christa found herself wondering what she was gonna do. This was unbearable. Now, there was at least one person during this time that offered some kind of support to her, and that was her own mother-in-law, a woman who had also plenty of experience with domestic abuse and domestic violence, and she had no trouble to grasp the parallels between her fucked up husband and her fucked up son. So one day, when her mother-in-law was lying in her deathbed, she called for Christa. And she told Christa something that would change her life forever. And so Christa's mother-in-law, she told her, "Hey kiddo, you know what? You are still young. You can still start over. If I were you, I would put poison in his food." Now Christa was like, great plan. She really kept it in mind, but she didn't really know what poison to use. It was just lying around in a house somewhere. What is she gonna do? Christa knew nothing. When do you Where do you? She had no clue. But funny enough, soon after that, in 1952, the poison Christa would use later was practically laid right at her feet. Because you see, her father-in-law, he was a hobby gardener. And one day he came over to Christa and he told her, listen, keep the kids away from the weed killer I keep in my shed, E605, because they will die an agonizing and gruesome death. Aha! Good to know. Now, this specific weed killer, E605, wasn't commonly known as a poison for humans, but just as a weed killer. And so it was up for sale. You could just get it anywhere. It was easy to get hold of this deadly poison. And so one morning in September of 1952, while Christa was preparing breakfast for her and her husband, she poured a little bit of E605 into his morning milk. And Carl Joseph, he drank without hesitation. And after that, he left the house for a hairdressing appointment. But after 25 minutes, he came back saying that he wasn't feeling well. He said that he felt dizzy, that he had stomach cramps, and eventually he collapsed on the living room couch, and he begged for a doctor. But when the doctor got there, it was already too late, and Carl Joseph Lehmann was dead. So the doctor who arrived at the scene and who would issue the death certificate, he knew Carl Joseph personally. He was his doctor. And so to him, the matter seemed clear. Death from a ruptured stomach ulcer. And Christa, she did it. She got away with it. And more importantly, she was finally free from her abusive husband. So let's see. Her husband is dead. Her mother-in-law is dead. The only one who's left is her father-in-law. And Christa continued on living with him under the same roof. She was still in charge of the household and the laundry and making breakfast. And the two could not be said to have a good relationship, but they made an arrangement, However, her conservative father-in-law didn't really like Christa's way of living after her husband's death. Christa was out there. She was partying, she was drinking, she was flirting the night away. And let's just say her father-in-law was not amused. But he never said anything. That is, until Christa started to have an affair with a married man. And even worse, she got pregnant by this very man. Now, her father-in-law, he was outraged by this illegitimate child, and he threatened Christa to call her out to the so-called Vice Squad. The adultery was not really the problem. The thing is, Christa had informed herself about an abortion back then when she found out she was pregnant. And an abortion, I think it was even illegal at the time, and in general, it was a big no-go. And Christa feared that the Vice Squad would also stumble across the mysterious death of her husband once they had found out that she wanted to get an abortion. She couldn't possibly let that happen. She had to do something before her father-in-law would turn her in. And she still got some of that E605 left in the shed. It had worked the first time. And since she was still in charge of the household and the cooking, it should be easy to slip in the stuff. And so one day, she put a load of E605 into his morning yogurt. And again, the poison did not fail to work. On his way to work, her father-in-law suddenly collapsed on his bicycle and fell to the floor. Milky white liquid was coming from the corner of his mouth, and he died shortly afterwards. The doctor wrote in his death certificate, heart failure. And then in 1954, Christa met her one and only friend, a woman called Annie Hamann, also a widow, and she lived just nearby in a house with her mother and her 9-year-old daughter. And Christa and Annie are both single and ready to mingle. And they spend their time out there drinking, dancing, and they just love to flirt with the American soldiers who were stationed in Germany at the time. Although Annie's mother, she wasn't really fond of the friendship with Christa, she found that Christa was kind of creepy. So on February the 13th, 1954, Christa suddenly showed up at Annie's doorstep. And in her hands, she held a box of chocolates. 5 little chocolates, all neatly packed with some kind of very delicious liquor in it. And, Christa, she probably wanted to make a good impression on her friend's mother, And so she gave 1 chocolate to her friend, Annie, 2 chocolates to her 2 brothers who happened to be there at the same time. She gave 1 to Annie's mother, and she ate the last one herself. But Annie's mother, she didn't eat the chocolate right away. She said that she wasn't really in the mood for liquor or chocolate, and she said she would eat it later. What Christa did not know was that Annie's mother had absolutely no intention of ever eating this chocolate. But she wouldn't throw it away either. Instead, she put it on a plate, and she put the plate into the fridge. And this is where it should stay for 2 days, until Annie found it. And Annie thought, well, my mother's not going to eat it anyway, and it was super delicious. So Annie took a little bite. But this chocolate, it tasted different than the one she had eaten previously. It was super bitter. And so she wouldn't eat the rest of it, but instead, and I'm really sorry, but instead she gave the rest of the chocolate to the dog, which is a really bad idea in the first place. And unfortunately, again, the poison did not fail to work. Half an hour later, Annie suddenly collapsed. She said that she felt dizzy and that she suddenly couldn't see anything anymore. And her mother, she ran over to the neighbors to get some help, but any help came too late. When the doctor arrived at the house, Annie Lehmann had already died. Now, the doctor at the scene, he would have probably suspected another health-related cause of death if the dog, 10 minutes later, would not have shown the same exact symptoms. And this dog died a really agonizing death right in front of their feet. And the doctor, he found that very suspicious. Something was going on here. And so he informed the police. Now, the investigators, they pretty quickly made a connection between this mysterious death and the chocolates. Chocolate was also found in the dog's stomach, but they didn't think that it was an elaborate murder attempt. Instead, they went and confiscated all the manufacturer's boxes and chocolates and examined every single one of them. Maybe there was something wrong with the production, maybe the manufacturer was blackmailed and somebody had poisoned selected boxes, but no one was ever able to find the tiniest bit of poison in any of these chocolates. Also, apart from the fact that they didn't have a clue what kind of poison they were actually dealing with in the first place. So everything seemed to be in order with the production or the manufacturer. No related cases were ever reported. And so investigators slowly but firmly started to focus on the bearer of the chocolates, Christa Lehmann. And this is when they found out about the mysterious death of her husband and her father-in-law. And you already probably guessed it. Annie, of course, was not the target. Annie's mother was the one who was supposed to die because she was against the friendship of Annie and Christa. But Christa had accidentally now killed her best friend. So before going over to Annie's house, Christa had bought a box of chocolates with 5 chocolates in it. And from one of them, she removed the bottom very carefully. She poured out the liquor, mixed it with E605, then refilled the chocolate with the poisonous liquor, and slowly and carefully pressed the bottom back onto the chocolate with a warm knife. And then she put the chocolate back in the box, being very careful to really remember which one of these 5 chocolates was poisonous. And she deliberately gave Annie's mother this very chocolate. If she didn't eat them now, she would eat them later. So after learning about her friend's unfortunate death, Christa was absolutely grief-stricken and consumed with a bad conscience. And at her friend's funeral, she ended up being arrested. She was questioned about not only her friend's death, but also about the death of her husband and her father-in-law. And a week after her friend's death, Christa said that she was ready to confess. And she did just that in the presence of a priest and her father. In court, she pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder and she was sentenced to 3 life sentences. In 1977, she was released due to good behavior, and ever since she lived under a new identity. We don't really know what happened to her. Today, she should be 101 years old. The last time she was seen alive was in 2019. I guess it's fair to say that Christa Lehmann is not alive anymore. Small remark to this case, which I think was super interesting. Her case was a big thing in Germany and in the media, and everybody was talking about it. And this was also when E605, the weed killer that was in everybody's sheds, came to public attention as a poison for humans. And what happened was a wave of suicides. People just had it in their sheds, and now they also learned that it also led to a quick death. And this effect is called the Werther effect, which I think is super interesting. So as a reaction to this wave of suicides, the selling of the weed killer was not stopped, but at least limited. But in 2001, it was banned completely. However, there are still some murder cases in which E605 was used. The last one that we know about here in Germany happened in 2019. Hold on. She was last seen alive in 2000. No. Do you think? No, it's fine. That was the story of the poisonous witch of Worms, Christa Lehmann. Let me know what you think down below in the comment section. Also hit that subscribe button. Really, go crazy, smash it. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful weekend ahead of you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. And what's left to say is, if you don't have any plans next Friday, why don't you meet me here for another cocktail and, of course, another mysterious true crime case. Mommy loves you.